Again, we appreciate everyone coming out tonight. My name is Pastor Damon Hamby of the Mount Vernon Church of Lanark. We are here tonight because wild, wonderful West Virginia is a fantastic place to discuss and resolve cultural and ethnic and racial issues. We understand that we do live in a state that is predominantly white. I have lived here all of my life, and I love my state. I'm part Greek and part black myself, and I have enjoyed rich experiences on both sides of the racial aisle in my lifetime. And West Virginia is not unique when it comes to the incendiary and even inflammatory issues that can arise here in the United States of America. And for this reason, Mr. Ben and Mrs. Carla Alston, among the rest of you who are concerned about these issues, we've gathered together tonight. We want to operate in the spirit of love and peace and harmony. We want to find common ground, and we want to glean whatever ideas we might tonight so that each of us can be a catalyst and an agent to improve our community and our city and our state and our country. So again, we thank you all for coming tonight. I will serve as one of three moderators, along with my two colleagues, whom I'll ask to introduce themselves in just a moment. We are going to flow in a couple of mini sessions, about 20 to 25 minutes each, one with current students and one with former students. Our mission tonight is not so much to promote what we, the grown-ups, feel in this hour, but we want to draw out what the young people feel and what their experiences are and have been concerning the topic at hand. So as we go through this, we want everyone to make a good mental catalog of what you hear tonight. If time permits, we may allow for some Q&A toward the end of the event. But until then, we just want to enjoy and experience what these young people have to say and think about these issues. So at this time, I'm going to ask each of my co-moderators to stand, and I want them to tell you their names and what they do.
I'm Neil Lacey. I was a teacher at Woodrow Wilson High School. I taught math from about 1972 to roughly 2016. I'm semi-retired now. I still work with the school in a lot of capacities, including a mentoring program, and in the past I was a sponsor at the Conservation Club, the Bible Club. In 1972, when I went to Woodrow, I actually participated in a forum a lot like this because there was a lot of racial tension because of the unfortunate way that the two schools, Stratton and Woodrow, were combined. And I'm still interested in Woodrow Wilson High School. It's been a large part of my life and will continue to be a part of my life in the future. And I've talked enough, so here you go, Damon.
Hi, my name is Lakaya Bankston. I am a therapist here. I work as a substance use disorder therapist in the city of Beckley. I'm a graduate of Woodrow Wilson, 2009 graduate, and I don't know exactly what all we need to talk about, but I mean, of course, I've had experiences with, race and ethnicity, things like that. I wasn't born in West Virginia. I was actually born in New Jersey. So when I did move here, I did notice the differences. So I'm excited to be a part of this.
All right. Okay, so the way this is going to flow, we have a handful of prodding questions that we are going to ask our students. We're going to encourage each one of them to participate and contribute, and we as the facilitators may ask follow-up questions. But again, tonight's focus is not so much to share our thoughts and opinions as it is to hear from the students. So if we could just open this up with a big round of applause for all these young people who have come out to share with us tonight. Thank you. All right, young people, the way we want to initiate this, I'll ask a question, and then Mr. MC, we're just going to we're going to start on this side, and we're going to pass the mic around as each one of you responds to the same question. If the question you hear is not one you feel prepared to answer or you don't think you have an answer, feel free to just pass the mic to the next person because we'll come back around with more questions, and hopefully each of you will hear something that you feel you can respond to in a way that means something to you. All right? Okay, first, how old were you when you first became aware of racial differences? At what point do you think you started to recognize there were differences between races? So we'll start on the far left.
I can't really recall an age, but more of the time when I was in kindergarten.
My late years in elementary school, like 4th, 5th grade.
I don't think I started to realize there was an issue with race until I was in middle school and started to be surrounded by people that I wasn't used to.
I'd probably have to say middle school too.
I would probably say around 3rd, 4th grade. I went to a newer school and I transferred from a school with no people other than white or Caucasian people. And then the new school I went to only had 2. So it was at an early age, but still very minimal.
I would also have to say about middle school, because I went to a predominantly African American elementary school. And coming from a biracial family, I was always accepted by both races. So going to a integrated middle school, I'd say about that time.
I went to a really small elementary middle school. It was like 300 kids at maximum, and I remember in about 2nd grade we moved to a bigger building, and there was one kid in 3 grades that was not white, and I remember seeing him, like, words started being said, and that's when I knew.
Good. Okay. She can hang on to the mic. This time we're going to start on this side, and we'll rotate back over. My fellow moderators, you have any follow-up you'd like to add to that?
I'm just curious. It seems like most of you noticed a difference either in like middle school or elementary school, somewhere around there, it seems like. What were the differences that you noticed?
We'll just go around again.
Like I said, there was a boy in one of my classes particularly that started to get picked on and bullied specifically for the color of his skin because he was different, and it hadn't clicked with me yet that difference meant something.
Hang on just one second. What we'll do, instead of just rotating person to person, anyone who feels like you want to respond to that question, if you'll just tip up your hand, and then we'll go directly to you, and that way anyone who doesn't want to answer, we don't have to pass by you. Anyone else have okay.
I would have to say when we started learning about history, and Black history to be particular, and the Rosa Parks movement, how everyone boycotted that, I would have to say about that time, I was started to think about where I would lie on the bus, if I would have to sit in the back or the front. And friends of mine, where would they have to sit if they were friends with me? So.
In my 3rd grade classroom, it was Black History Month, and we were learning about different topics. I don't remember off the top of my head. And there was one African American kid in our class. His name is James, and he was always top of the class. Even now, he's very smart, keeps 100 or above in all of his classes. And I remember it was Friday, the spelling test just came out, and he made 102. And one kid looked at him and said, "James, did you cheat the system?" And James said, "What do you mean?" And then the first kid said, "Well, you are Black, and by my standards, you shouldn't be making that high of scores," and called him uneducated just for the race, just because of his race.
I went to a really diverse elementary school, so a lot of people are used to being around black people or people of other cultures. But once I started middle school, most of the kids were white. And I started to hear comments like, oh my gosh, you don't act like a black kid, or you're playing soccer. Black kids shouldn't be playing soccer, or you don't have black people hair. Your hair's pretty. You're pretty. And from there, I started to realize that even though I was mixed and I might not face a lot of the challenges that other mixed girls might because I don't have predominantly African American features, that it was still going to affect me and that it still affected other kids in some way or another.
I realized when one of my closest friends pointed out that I didn't act like I didn't act like the black kids were supposed to act. I spoke proper, always kept good grades, and that's when I realized that people judge people for their race.
I suppose I have different experiences than the previous speakers, but I have black cousins, and one of my closest friends in elementary school was black, so I guess I didn't really acknowledge there were actual differences between skin color until it was pointed out in like history classes that black people, all they went through and all they've been through. So there wasn't really any tension in my early ages and experiences with that.
Okay. Moderators, anything else on that?
I wonder if you can remember an early time in your life when you personally were made very uncomfortable because of a racial difference between you and somebody else.
So what we'll do, if any one of you has a response to that, raise your hand, and then Mr. Breckenridge will bring you the mic.
So this past November, I got the opportunity to go to Atlanta with my 4-H group. And while in Atlanta, we were doing a service project with one of the local elementary schools. And I was reading to a small classroom. There's maybe 20 kids, and they were all black, and the teacher was white. And I was reading them their book, and then this one little boy by the name of Cario, this was a first grade classroom, Cario came up to me, and he takes his hand, and he rubs it against my arm, and he says, "I like your skin." And it was a little creepy, I will admit, but he was in first grade, so I didn't really hold it against him. And for the rest of that day, he just kind of clung to me. Like, I don't know, he just clung to me, and he wouldn't let me really interact with the other kids. And at the end of the day, he gave me like a really big hug, and he informed me that I was the only white person other than his teacher who was ever nice to him. So that just kind of opened my mind a little bit.
Around the end of first semester of this year, this was around November, December.
Bring the mic a little closer.
This is around November and December. We had watched the movie The Hate U Give in English class. And there's this one guy who is openly racist. And he continuously made comments to me and a couple of my friends about how the movie was biased towards white individuals. And we would always ask him, how is it biased when it's history? How is it biased when it is factual? And he would make the comments of, well, if you don't know what the movie is about, it's about police brutality against African Americans and how a lot of people don't realize how much it affects the community. And so he would say, well, does the police officer's life not matter as much as the black individual who was killed? And continuously we would say, well, the police officer isn't the one being shot, isn't the one being harassed and put into dangerous situations. He's the one getting off. So
In fourth grade, we had a girl transfer into my class who quickly became one of my best friends. Her name was Tara. And I remember, like, there wasn't anything that I really noticed different except for the fact that no one else in class would talk to her. And normally you wouldn't think that would be different from a new kid perspective. And then I remember she had corners in her hair that she would always put like these really pretty jewels in, and like jewels and barrettes and everything. And at one point during recess, she started doing my hair like that. And I remember I had a teacher come up to me and say, "You can't do that to her hair. She shouldn't even be allowed to wear that." And she had to be sent home and dress coded because she wasn't allowed to have cornrows or dreadlocks or anything.
So in 2017, I was at the Charlottesville, Virginia, almost riots for the protests, and it was the day after someone had been hit by a car. And on the Black Lives Matter side, I heard a lot of people screaming at the police and black police officers because they didn't believe that a black person should be a police. And then on the white nationalist side, I heard them throwing the N-word around like crazy. And it was over the Robert E. Lee statue. And I think I realized then that there's a lot of hate on both sides, but at the same time, I was a mixed girl walking up to the middle, and it was actually kind of scary to see how much hate that white nationalists do have towards people just because of their skin color, and how much harm that are caused on African Americans every single day just because of a little thing like that.
All right, we're going to ask another question. What do you think is the single most important factor that influences your ideas about race? So, for example, your parents and your family have certain ideas and values concerning race, and you begin to learn their values from childhood, and then you have friends who have ideas about it, you have classmates, you watch television, movies, and the music we listen to. So if you had to highlight what you think has the biggest influence on your attitude about race, which would it be?
I would say the media, because the general opinion and the general consensus, that's usually what people lean towards. And, you know, there's a lot of just the media. It would be my pick.
I would say people's parents, because they are brought up with their ideas no matter what it is, and that's what they come to believe. It's like that with anything.
Being mixed has probably influenced me the most because I really haven't had the chance to recognize what it would be like to be fully black or recognize what it would be to be fully white. And I've been able to accept the fact that everyone needs to be equal and that there are different cultures because I do have different cultures in me.
I'd have to say the media and how it portrays like different stereotypes for races. So like you see something, and if you don't really if you're not educated about it, like if your parents didn't teach you, you're going to think that's what's right or true.
I would have to say society and the economy in general, because it depends on your upbringing and how you are raised as to what your values and beliefs come from and how they influence your current beliefs.
At least in my case, it's been not just my parents, but parental figures in my life. Like a few coworkers from my mom's work are a mixed couple specifically, and before they moved to Morgantown, they were a very close influence on my life, and I don't think I would have the perspectives I do otherwise.
let's say your like family members, because you're around them the most, and like what they believe, like if they talk about it, it will become like the beliefs and like opinions that you form because you hear it all the time.
Thank you. That's good feedback, kids. Next question. Is it a good idea to learn about people from different backgrounds and why?
Absolutely, it is, because I believe everyone can contribute, no matter if you went to Harvard or you didn't go to college and you're not well educated. Like, everyone can contribute, no matter, like, even the most trivial things, and I think it's important to learn all about that.
It's very important to learn about people and the ways they think and why, because within different cultures, you learn that people think the way they think because of different reasons. And just because that you might not agree with it, and even if their morals or whatever might seem totally crazy, you start to realize that they are the way they are because of certain factors in their environment or within their parents and their family. And you start to realize that no matter the hate that some people might have for you, there's a reason why they have that hate. And then from there, you can start to learn how to become more educated, or to have them become more educated, I guess.
I say yes because it's kind of like studying a religion, because you have to know other people's beliefs and values, and you have to learn as to why they have those and what influences them to believe that, or where their hatred comes from, because it could come from experience, and it could just be because they just have no knowledge of what it is like to be that certain race.
I believe to learn about people from different cultural backgrounds is incredibly important, because if nothing else, from a more privileged standpoint, you often get sucked into a bubble where you don't necessarily, the things that you can hear about that will affect people who are not as privileged as you, they don't happen to you. It's not something that you can be shown directly. So to hear those experiences from the people who experience them and to learn from them is incredibly important in order to establish any empathetic connection.
I say yes, it is important because knowledge is power, and if we have knowledge of everybody's background, we can have the power to change these things that hold us apart.
Can you think of a time in your life when you had some type of preconception or misconception about a certain group, and an interaction that you had with somebody in that group changed something about the way you felt?
My mom is white, so I am around white people a lot, and I used to go towards more south of West Virginia all the time when I was little, and I was the only mixed kid or colored person there. And I started to realize that people treated me differently because of that, and I didn't know why until I started to look around and I noticed that there was no other colored person there, and I started to realize why that was.
When around seventh grade, I tried out for a travel volleyball team, and before that time, I had always been on a predominantly black team, and that's what I became to know. Coming from a predominantly black school, I only knew that black people played that sport. I only knew that black people were good at that sport. So when I went to try out for this travel team, I was the only colored person, or person of color. So that kind of changed my beliefs as to, or what I've come to know as black people are better at that.
So, one of the big parental figures in my life, his name's Eric. He's an extension agent with West Virginia. He was a families and health agent, and before an issue occurred in the workplace. And he was the only black male person who worked with families and health in that unit. And I remember he and my mom went to a seminar in Kansas, and watching all of the people, when you look out into the crowd of those, all you see are like these 80s and 90s white homemaker ladies who are like there and knitting. And I remember after Eric had his speech, I remember we all went to a buffet thing, and one of the homemakers came up to us and said, "I can't believe you have this job and you speak so well. I've never heard someone like you speak like that." And she said that her whole homemaker group was terrified when he walked in because they had never experienced someone who knew how to cook and sew and do all these home economics projects, who also was there to connect with them. And it just struck me as incredibly oblivious that they could think that someone who is black can't be a home economics teacher, can't be a professor on that. Like, that just blew my mind out of the water. I couldn't believe it.
My question was, I have like a million questions, by the way. Like we can't even get through all of them. You all